getting those, and if you wouldn't mind, if there's a psalm that comes back, I'm going to read it in a minute. I've got it here too, but thank you. I did want to share one thing, and then we're gonna look at this Psalm 1, which Julie, when you were talking about water, it's going to bring it in beautifully. It actually will bring in, I think, a lot of things that we talked about. I loved what y'all shared. I was wishing I was taking notes. I'm like, these are pearls of wisdom. One of my mentors says, Carol, remember, we can speak from our wise woman voice, right? And that can sound like, oh, well, that's kind of braggadocious or something, but no, really, that's God's grace. We've lived a lot of life. We've seen things happen, and so we can encourage people from what we've gone through and some of the things that you all shared. So thank you. I do want to share that one of the themes when we talk about in and out, thank you, one of the themes that Scripture talks about is the area of fruitfulness. And here we go. Everybody go here. And fruit is anything that God produces in and through us. So the thing that was interesting that I learned was that there's two kinds of fruit in Scripture. There's inward fruit of character, and many of us know the verse, Galatians 5, that says, the fruit of the Spirit is, there's 9 things: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And then there's also the fruit of ministry, or the fruit of what our lives are about, and that's outward fruit. And so, for example, in the book of Romans, it talks about how Paul, the Apostle Paul, went to reap a harvest among the people. So that meant that he saw people who really, through his testimony, were able to come to faith and come to Christ. So he had an outward fruitfulness. And the thing I love that's so basic about fruit is it's like a fruit tree doesn't strain to produce fruit. It doesn't, apple, 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 orange, orange, orange.
Unless my lemon tree.
Okay.
It doesn't ever bear fruit.
I was going to say that. But if life gives you lemons, Julia, you make lemonade.
Well, it's in the dumpster today. I threw it away because the lock broke. So there you go.
So anyway, but the very basic thing is the tree lets the sap run through it and it produces its fruit. And so I want to look today, as we're going to talk about building a beautiful path, but I want to start with God's Word that brings together. I actually looked at the different versions of this passage and found the one that had the word path in it. So y'all can just relax and sit back. I'm going to read you Psalm 1, and you should have it in front of you. How blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water. Julie, that's your part. Which yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and whatever he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but they are like chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. I've always loved that psalm, and I was remembering that whole progression of walking, standing, sitting. I remember with our kids, like yesterday when they were young, like, be careful who you walk with, your companions, because you're going to stand with them and then you're going to sit with them. And we know what all that leads to, right? But I think for us, as even at this stage of life, we need to consider our path. We need to consider, where am I walking? Where am I standing? Where am I sitting? And then the promise that we will be like a tree that's firmly planted. I think it's interesting because the first 3 verses really show a person who's dependent on God. The last 3 verses show a person that's independent of God. And so you can see the distinction between those two. So as we enter into talking about a beautiful path, this will just be our backdrop kind of to that. So wanted to share that. In a few minutes, I'm going to actually show you my path that I drew in my life, about my life. And it's always a little vulnerable when you do that, but I'm glad to do that because I think we need to be that way as women. But before I do that, I wanted to tell you, have any of you seen A Beautiful Day day in the neighborhood, Mr. Rogers? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I went with a dear friend to that a couple weeks ago, and we both had tears rolling down our face during it. But there was one part in the movie that I loved, and I wanted to turn my cell phone on and get light and write it down because I wanted to share it with you all, but I made myself memorize it. And it was when the man who was given the assignment, the journalist, to write the article on Mr. Rogers' life. And Mr. Rogers was kind of in a hectic venue outside of a hotel or something. I can't remember the details. But his wife, Joanne Rogers, was standing to the side. And the journalist went over to her and he said, how does he do this? Like, what has he done with his life to have this kind of impact? And she said, she was pensive and she was like, he reads scripture every day. He swims a lot of laps. He prays for people by name. He writes hundreds of letters. And I was like, whoa. So there was Mr. Rogers' beautiful path that he was building, and I took note of that. But then later in the movie, she said, but don't think that he's perfect. Okay, he's got his weaknesses, and he actually has an anger issue. But because he is such a gifted musician, when he gets angry, he gets the low notes on the piano. They really said he did that. I'm like, gosh, that'd probably be a good outlet for me instead of going to the cookie jar or something. Yeah. But, thank you, Levon. Great. We wanted to be kind of creative there. I'm like, when I start talking about Mr. Rogers, move to the piano. But isn't that a beautiful illustration of the path that just some of the elements in that. So I'm going to show you my very basic stick figure path. And what I want to say while Jennifer's pulling that up is your beautiful stationery that Janet got you. As I talk about my path, no, not that one. There's another one. That was my first draft. The one that's darker marker.
Okay. I'll get to it. I don't know if it got through. It'll...
At the bottom.
Oh, there it is, at the very middle and the bottom.
Middle bottom. Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to explain this to you in 5 to 10 minutes. I promise I won't give you my whole life story here. But what I wanted to say, I just lost my train of thought. My path. I completely lost it, but that's okay. But what I wanted to say about your stationery was, if you want, while I'm talking, as you want to do, you are welcome to draw a path on the front of that flowered stationery, kind of as a visual for yourself. Because and if you don't want to, you can do it when you get home. Like I said, you can take notes if you want to on the back of the scripture sheet. But what we'd like to put before you, and I'm going to explain my path to you, is the thought of this week, as you go home and maybe get a cup of coffee tomorrow morning, whatever. Think about what path steps you have. Basically what I'm going to share today from my life is the end of the path, which is like the desired outcome of the path. Okay, so that would be the first thing. And I'm going to break this down. I know you can't see it real well, but don't worry about it. It's just the idea. And then I'm going to share just 8 path steps that have helped me stay in a path of oncoming beauty. Now, for all of us, those are different, right? We're not going to have the same ones. So don't think, oh, I have to have this or I don't, whatever. And then I'm going to share 3 impediments or barriers that are true in my own life that pull me back from my beautiful path. Now, I probably could write a lot more than 3, right? But I'm going to share my 3 predominant ones that came to mind. So I hope that makes sense to you. So the question I asked at the top is, what am I doing to put myself in a pathway of oncoming beauty? If that's going to heal us as women and cause us to grow again, there's God's part and our part. This is our part, right? Life happens. A lot of things happen in our life that we can't control. But what are the things that I can put in place so that, like I've told my husband, this is so hard, but I have such a beautiful path. Not because I'm special. It's because there's a lot of good things that are always coming at me. So here I am at the bottom. I'm just going to walk you through, first of all, my path steps. No, first of all, I'm going to talk about the desired outcome. Then I'm going to say my path steps. I'm going to say my barriers. So the desired outcome at the end of the path really has to do with that area of fruitfulness that I shared with you. And my overarching goal would be that my life would be fruitful, inwardly, character-wise, and outwardly, ministry-wise. And that sounds kind of elusive, like, okay, great, fruitful, But I guess if I were to break it down, I put there 5 priority areas of my life. The first one would be my relationship with God. The second one, in my case, and not all of us are married here, but for me, it would be my relationship with my husband. The third would be my relationship with my children. And you know what? I missed one, sorry. Relationship with God, I'm going to say, see, this is indicative, kind of revealing. I should have said relationship with self second. Rich needs to be my second one. So even what Betsy was talking about was so good. So relationship with God, relationship with self second, relationship with Stuart, my husband, third, relationship with my children, fourth, and then relationship to whatever ministry God calls me to, whether it's here with Win or who I'm actually employed by, Athletes in Action, or even in my neighborhood, wherever I have ministry. So that my desired outcome is that I would have increasing fruit in those 5 areas of my life. So here are my path steps, and I'm just going to kind of go back and forth like a zigzag. So there I am. I'm not artistic, as you can see, but I'm at the end, the little stick figure, and if you go to number 1 to the right, I just put daily quiet time. Now, as I share that, that's not a legalistic thing, like you have to read your Bible every day. No, but it is a habit that has helped me down the path, that every morning I have a few figures out. That's my Bible. I really prefer a tall mug for coffee, not a short one, okay? And then that's a candle next to it. And then I have an X over my cell phone, which I've started implementing in the last couple months, where I turn off my cell phone, I leave it, and I take my timer with me, so I'm not paranoid about missing an appointment or something. And but that's given me a lot of peace not to do that. So I start my day, I'm reading through the Bible in a year right now. There's various programs through your churches. Whatever you do, that's my first path step. And again, these aren't necessarily in order of how I do them, but the second one to the side is I put emotional touch point with Stuart, which sounds funny because we've always said in our marriage, we got to have our emotional touch points, right? And that's us sitting out by the trees, weather, depending on the weather, after he gets home from work, having a refreshing drink, talking about our day. And it's not going to take that long. It might be 20 minutes or 15 minutes, but it's a highlight because we just have a habit of doing that. And, we'll pray at the end sometimes for people that are hurting, going through pain in their lives, or just thing in our family life or whatever. And then the third is girlfriends. We got to have our girlfriends. Oh my goodness. I love my girlfriends. I know all of us do. But that's just a little group of, women either here in Austin, women around the country that I get on the phone with. Women, there's a proverb that says iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another, Proverbs 27:17. And I think my women in my life just sharpen me. And our host team sharpens me so much. I'm so thankful for them. And then fourth is the area of health. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But there I am walking. I've really gotten into walking more. And then to the side of me, maybe that's kind of revealing, or the weights are kind of on the ground over there. Vicky's not here today, God's dead, so I can kind of go with this. But she's actually the person who's been trying to work with me on weights. But those are weights. And then I have a sunshine with a 20 in it because a doctor told me once you have to get 20 minutes of sunshine a day. So I really try to do that. Today will be hard. But and then I have notes above my head because one of the outlets for me when I walk is I love listening to 70s music. Yes. And part of that is my life is kind of intense in ministry. So that just gets me in a not intense place. And it's really fun. And I'm keeping a 70s playlist because I turned 60 in September. So I'm going to make sure all those songs are, my kids are proud of me because I usually don't do good with playlists. But anyway, that's number 4. And then number 5, I have just the kind of the acronyms for the different groups I'm involved in. The ministry we're employed by is Crew. Our group WIN, which is so life-giving. MIP is Moms in Prayer. I've been praying with women since my kids were little. Monday mornings out in Round Rock. You're all invited if you want to drive to Round Rock. And then Hunter's Chase is our neighborhood. We have socials, our little cul-de-sac, especially Julia lives in my neighborhood too. But our cul-de-sac has really come together and done birthdays, supported each other in different events and different things. So we really have a good community there. And then HCBC is our church, Hill Country Bible Church, which I have done various things and had small women's groups through that. So all of that is very life-giving. And then number 6 is who I work for, Athletes in Action, which is under the umbrella of Crew, and I have regional responsibilities with my husband for the women in our 4-state region. I have local responsibilities, particularly at Concordia right now with some women that I'm training, and then I have classes that I take theologically that help me as well. And then number 7 is FT for family time, and that's our house, I guess our house of origin. Of course, our kids are all grown, but I think the way, it's the path step that I love with our grown kids is just being together for special occasions, being together for holidays, being together for to travel. We got to go to several weddings together as a family this fall, and it was just so wonderful to be together. And then lastly, 8 is just a couple books because I'm a big reader. And I still use the library. I'm really antiquated, but I love it because I check it out and it comes up online. I go get my books. And that has been, it calms me down, which as you can see, I need to be calmed down. So it just kind of is a peaceful place for me, reading. And so those are 8 path steps that keep me in a place of oncoming beauty. Now, I do have, like Mr. Rogers, some major impediments. And they are all, I put them in F's. Facebook stalking, food grazing, and family fretting. Those would be my 3 F's. And there's more, I'm sure. Facebook stalking. So I literally chose not to join Facebook when everybody did a million years ago because I'm such a people junkie and I knew I would become obsessed with it. But what one of my dear friends says is, for a person not on Facebook, you do Facebook more than anybody I know. And it's like, how does that happen? Well, my husband's on Facebook, so I go through his and nobody knows it. I'm really sneaky. So I really have had to, especially with my kids' dating life, I'm not going to lie, it's real easy to want to find out all these things. And so I have really tried to say, I'm not going to do it. I'm taking a sabbatical from Instagram or Facebook. And I haven't been perfect at that, but I have for quite a while really stepped back. The second one is food grazing, okay? I talked about Mr. Rogers hitting the low notes. Well, I just feel like it's been a bad habit in my life for a really long time, where when I'm busy and I'm active and I'm running on the go and we're traveling, and it's just where I've gone. And so what do I do to deal with that? Well, I don't give up, first of all. I just met with a nutritionist in Georgetown a couple weeks ago, just trying to lean in at my age, my life, and who I am. And like my husband said, honey, you don't have to be perfect, right? None of us have to be perfect. We're all gonna have our areas, right? But we still keep leaning in and we keep on, and that's what I'm doing in that area. So that I'm a really good exerciser, have to work on the food grazing. And then the last one is family fretting. I know none of us deal with that here, no. But just the area of anxiety with especially grown children, I think. I don't know about you, but that's what can wake me up in the middle of the night, that's what can wake me up in the morning. Thinking about my kids, if they're hurting. And I forgot to say, back on the Facebook one, I think even comparison things, like, well, why is that happening with them and not with us? Or why is that, that's where all those things that our teenagers deal with, we can deal with, at least I can. So back to the family fretting, I think one of my friends, and I've shared this up here before, talked about that red light, yellow light, green light thing a few years ago. Do y'all remember when I shared that? And she said, Carol, this is a woman who's older and wiser than me, and she said, when your kids are in their 20s and 30s and getting established, she said, keep a yellow light. And I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, it doesn't mean negative, it just means be cautious. And she said, because I'm not like suction cupped, connected to my kids. I mean, really, at this stage, they are their own people. And so it's easy for me with my personality to want to be in everything with them. Others of us have other issues. We might be way the other way. But I think if I keep a yellow light, it gives me a lot of peace, and especially maybe with daughters even more. But I had a little victory the other day because we had been at a winter retreat with our ministry, and I was driving back and already really wanting to talk with one of my daughters. And so I'm sitting here thinking, should I text her? I was kind of being cautious, thinking about it. And I thought, no, I'm gonna wait. So I got in the middle of Julia's and my favorite H-E-B, McNeil and Farmer, and we live up north. And all of a sudden a text came up and she's like, hey, I'm home tonight if you want to talk or whatever. I'm like, yes! This lady was getting a pizza out. She was like, whoa. But anyway, it was worth waiting. It was worth having that yellow light. But a lot of times I don't. And I've had so much anxiety, especially when we've been in crisis as a family at different times, where I have been suction cupped to my kids. And I think it is good to remember it's their lives. And so those are 3 things that can pull me down, but I'm in process with those. So I hope that's helpful as you kind of look at your life. And I would love for y'all to, maybe journal, pray, talk to the Lord about this and do your paths. And then when you come back in 2 weeks, let's have a little sharing time. We're not gonna have everybody share it all, but maybe even a couple people who wanna share about what their beautiful path looked like. And hopefully in 2020, that will help us. So as we close, I have the honor, I told you I was gonna tell you about Becky Dixon more. So I'm gonna have Becky, you're right there, come on up. And I'm gonna interview her about her beautiful path. Now I have to say that Becky really is probably one of the biggest reasons we're having WIN, because a lot of you are connected with Becky, and she was invited by Kelly Petrick, who's one of my dear, dear friends. Some of you might know her, who's now moved to Colorado. She was invited to one of our first small groups, and it's like the rest is history, but after starting our small group, we thought, we need to expand this. And, it takes a person who knows the community, who's been with the Dixons, how God has used it. In fact, I texted her last night. She was at a high school basketball game. I'm like, wow.
Can't give it up, guys.
Yeah, I'm like, I am so impressed. But Becky has just been a precious gift to all of us. And again, I just will always say she is so much the reason why we have this group. And she responds with such humility to that, because that's who she is. So I'm so thankful for you, Becky. And I'm just thankful you said yes to coming to that first small group. And I just love, Becky is a wordsmith. Along with Janet, she helps put our words together for things like the questions today. She is a wise woman who has made so many great choices and is a couple steps ahead of us in life, and we appreciate learning from you. Oh, no. It never looks so good, I'll tell you that much. So I'm going to just ask her a couple questions. And by the way, for those who are new, we are so committed to getting you out of here by 1. So I don't think we've ever been late, right? Mm-hmm. So we will not be late. Okay, so Becky, tell us about your journey and how you've built a beautiful path in your life.
Okay, I'll do a quick bio just so that you know where I'm coming from and what my background is. I'm going to be 65 next month, so it's a long path, and I'm filling out Medicare forms right now, and it comes fast, girls. If you're not there yet, just get ready, because how did this happen? Anyway, I have had mostly a beautiful path. I will say I've been really blessed with some fortunate things, but there have been some dark times too. But as we say, we want to put ourselves in an oncoming beauty-lined path. I was raised by parents who loved me dearly, very functional family, grew up in Bloomington, Indiana, a little idyllic university town. My brother and sister and I were raised in the church, so we did have a foundation of faith. I can't say that my faith was on fire when I was growing up then, but it did lay some foundational pieces that were useful later. High school, I did go to Young Life and went to an amazing Young Life camp where I had kind of one of those pivotal moments where I just knew God was real. So along with my bio here, I'll do my little faith journey too. Yeah. But so in high school, I had that moment where God really got my heart. And of course, then I moved all of 6 blocks away to go to school. I was away at school at Indiana University. And my faith was really stagnant then. I know that's not unusual, but it was, I was busy with other things, my sorority and dating and business degree, and it was, my faith was not vibrant. Bruce and I met my junior year, and we, like silly babies, got married my, first semester of my senior year. So I graduated early, and we were off and running. looking back, I have to say that I did know there was something missing, but I was so crazy in love. But there was an emptiness, I think that little part of our heart that God wants to fill, that wasn't being nurtured back then. But we hit the ground running, and over the next 43 years, raised 3 kids. I have 2 sons and a daughter, 2 great daughter-in-laws, and now 5 precious, precious little grandbabies that just have my heart big time. But we moved around a lot early on. We started in Charlotte, went to Cincinnati, then to Phoenix, and to Austin, and to Phoenix, and to San Diego, and back to Austin. All that was in the first probably 15 years of our marriage, and then we've been here now for 27 years. So that's my technical path, but the beautiful path.
Tell us about it.
There are, I would say, the 3 things that you've mentioned. I'll do some repeating, but I think for me, the beautiful path comes in when I'm feeling balanced. And the elements that I have to have in balance are my spiritual life, my physical well-being, and the other might be like the psychological or emotional or social, I think gets tied up in that leg too. But my spiritual life, I do get fueled by going to church. That worship hour centers me, reminds me of all that's good and how God is in charge. And so going to church is important for me. I'm doing better about my daily devotional. I've never been totally disciplined with that. But Carol gave me, I left it back in the back, a devotional book for this year, and I've been very diligent with it. I'm doing better. And that really does set the tone for my day, just to be mindful of how God's working through it and in it and among us. And so that part has been helpful. And then also I think part of the spiritual life is that I feel like we're all designed to serve, and so to be in a place where I'm serving in some capacity that's using whatever gifts I may have, that's the spiritual leg of this tripod. And then the physical, do you feel like we just need to take care of ourselves? I play a lot of tennis, absolutely love getting that exercise. I used to take Amy's Pilates class. She's not my teacher anymore, but I'll show up there from time to time. Just being intentional about getting exercise, it makes me feel better. If any of you know my husband, you know he's a terribly disciplined exerciser, good eater through necessity with some health issues. But anyway, so he keeps me pretty well on the track with...
He's like Mr. Rogers, right? He swims a lot of laps.
He swims a lot. We love watching Mr. Rogers.
I thought of Bruce. He swims a lot of
Not a
laps.
bad stroke for a non-swimmer. Anyway, so we try to eat well. I think that one area of health that I could really improve on is sleep. I'm a total night owl. I don't get enough sleep, but 30
I'm
times.
the emails I've gotten from you.
Yeah. I wish they didn't have times on it, because I'm really reluctant to send my emails out at 2 a.m. But anyway, so the emotional or social, psychological side of me that has to be in balance is my relationships. I feel I'm real intentional about nurturing those. My sister and my family relationships. My sister is just the dearest person in my life, and we talk all the time, even though she's 1,000 miles away. But I realized as we were getting into this phase of life, as Carol mentioned earlier, I was feeling like some of those relationships had petered out. You know, our kids were not bringing us together anymore, and I was missing meaningful community. And that's why when Carol's initial group got together, I just felt really nurtured by that. And I felt like it was very indicative. I was missing those kind of meaningful connections with other women. And now that we're in a different stage of life, our challenges are different than they were. And so I loved having the chance to expand this group and to be all together and focus on some things we can help each other. And so that, for me, is really important. And I think that, we just find people that bring out the best in you or that make you feel whole. And I think there's a lot of joy in that. So those are my beautiful, and then obviously the things that just are icing on the cake. I just totally delight in my grandchildren. They light me up like nobody else. And I love to do very small gardening in my backyard. I can't tell you how goofy I am when the newest bud pops and I'm seeing a little snow pea. Amy's been recipient of some of my little lettuces. Oh, they're so beautiful. But it just really brings me joy. So I'll go out to my little garden and just marvel. And I love to knit. And Jean Marie had a beautiful hand-knitted shawl on today. You'll have to see it. But I'm just drawn to the textures and the creative process, and maybe it just makes me always feel productive too. But I love giving the things that I give, and it just makes me feel good. So those are things that kind of soothe me and fuel me and make my path beautiful.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Long answer.
No, it was perfect. So Becky, obviously, we've all talked about, we all have different pockets of pain in our life in whatever area, and it's seasonal. I know we were in deep pain 3 years ago. We're in a better place. It's just the ebb and flow of life, right? So what has brought you, what has allowed you to stay on the path when pain has come your way? And, what's kept you going down the path? Yeah.
Well, first and foremost was just this foundational faith. I felt like there's always hope. That was always something to hold on to. But I think also living with a sense of gratitude. Someone mentioned that in their card description. I don't know if it is a gift to be given the sense of gratitude, or if that was taught to me by my parents. It was important that we were grateful for what we had, but I think if you approach all things in life with looking to be grateful for what comes your way, you'll find either a silver lining, you'll find joy, you'll find purpose in it. And so that has really brought me through some hard times. I think also I mentioned to someone today, my dad was just the biggest optimist, and he had a wonderful outlook on life. So again, that's kind of hand in hand with a sense of gratitude, but just thinking that that there's potential good here. This could turn out well, or just acknowledging when all is good. And it went, as my faith developed, that bloomed, of course, into just seeing how God's promises are true. He is with us always. He does provide hope. God's presence and his example of Jesus have gotten me to a place where there's always hope. So through those dark times, we've got the reassurance.
I do see that in you a lot. And so what about when, and again, I've been there, but what about when you're just in that paralyzing pain where, it's like, wait, I can't,
Yeah, prayer is the only thing that's been the answer. I think my first go-to earlier in life was always to reach out to a family member to help me through it. As I've gotten older, well, first of all, my mom passed away. I think a lot of us are in that situation of losing some of those real dependable supports. My sister's always there for me. But I realized that God really wants me to come to him first and put my burdens there. And I have, this sounds probably super corny, but I'm gonna just share it anyway. There have been times, because I'm a night owl and I have to get up and hit the ground running, I don't have that quiet time in the morning, but my prayer time is at night. And I have laid there sometimes, and of course it's terrible times, because then you're thinking of all of what you want to, that you're concerned about, all that's on your heart, and so you're not going to sleep, thus the sleep issue. I think there have been a handful of times where I felt that turmoil and anxiety, and I just thought, I can't carry this by myself right now. And I have literally imagined putting these problems or worries in boxes on a silver tray and lifting that tray up and say, God, it's yours. I got to give this over to you. And even now, I just get goosebumps down my body. It has literally felt like a burden has been lifted off of my shoulders. And of course, the next morning, the problems are there, but I have a sense of calm about it, and that God's got it, and I just am coming along and seeing how this is all going to play out. So
wonderful, thank you.
Yep.
So any final thoughts you would want to say to the ladies about, anything you want to say about path steps, or what you would encourage us in?
all right, let me look over.
Yeah.
I was gonna, how much time do we have?
We're doing good. We have a solid 5 minutes or 10 minutes, yeah.
All right, well, just, because I keep talking about life being great, I mean, there are dark times, and
Yeah.
30 years ago, I could spend hours describing what really happened, and I'm gonna be real vague here because of time constraints. But about 30 years ago, my husband went through a horrific experience with his job. He worked for a guy that ended up, is father of one of his collegiate swimming buddies, big businessman, that was not trustworthy. And Bruce's, one of his best qualities is his loyalty and his devotion and his persistence, and he worked for a guy that wasn't worthy of his trust. We got embroiled in kind of hit me like this in a huge legal battle. The government was after his boss. The government put a lot of pressure on all the people that worked for him to testify. We were threatened, we were investigated. It was awful. You just had the rug ripped out from under you. You felt like, here we were, he was such a good Boy Scout, always did the right thing, never drank in school. He was Mr. Discipline. He was making good choices, making a good living for us. And then to have his integrity called into question, to be litigated, to have this be very, very public in the newspapers, and have people wonder if we were who we thought we were. It was just all of those artificial supports, like your ego and your financial well-being, were stripped away. And are we frauds? Are we really as bad as what all of this is making us look like? And again, I've been always the people pleaser, and I cared too much about what people thought, and so this was really humbling and awful. And I'm trying to raise 3 babies and stay grounded there and support him, and our world's falling apart. We don't know if we're going to have a future, and I kept thinking it can't get any worse than this, and it would, and it kept having these horrific turns. I have to say, throughout it all, there was always a sense of, we will get on the other side of this. I don't know what that's going to look like, but gratefully, my faith, at least at that stage in my life, was strong enough where I knew God was not going to let us go. And it took forever for it to resolve, and we had lost all our savings, we sold our house to pay the attorneys, we were starting over altogether, but there was a future, and Bruce could get hired again. He had, it was a long path, but 5 years later, it was all finally over, and we started over. And it, as hard as it was, I have to say that Bruce and I both, looking back, would not change it. And perhaps you all have gone through some rough times where you might say the same. This wasn't the worst thing that could happen. We didn't lose a child. We didn't lose, neither one of us perished in it. But there were people who did commit suicide through this whole thing, and it was ugly.
I'm so sorry.
Anyway, happy Wednesday here. But no, the thing is, Bruce and I say, if we hadn't gone through that, we would never have been able to see the full goodness of God, to see how He really is there. He is going to take us beyond our troubles and woes, and so both of it put us on a very different trajectory with our faith life and our purpose, and so we don't regret that it happened. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But, so when I mentioned earlier that I had attentive as my word, I would just say that I would encourage all of you to do the same. Find the things that make you feel like you have the wind beneath your wings, like God's just with you. When you're hitting on all cylinders, I'm in the process of evaluating one of my service opportunities right now. I've been a CASA volunteer with kids that are in the CPS system. And I think the 7 kids that I've advocated for have benefited from my help, but at the same time, I might not have the right heart to do this well because it's kind of a burden for me, and it's one of those things I don't sleep well about, and I'm thinking there are other times when I'm serving that I feel like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I'm soaring. And so, even though I've loved and I felt very called to be a CASA volunteer, right now I'm taking a little pause to say, God, let me know if this is really where you want me to use my gifts, because I find so much pain in what these kids are experiencing, and I don't have the boundaries on my heart that I need to. So, there you go.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. And we want to have one of us, share even within the group from time to time. I think it's neat to bring. Thank you for opening up your life.
You're welcome.
Sharing about that.
I felt safe doing it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you're good. You're an easy audience. So we thank you so much. We want to close by letting you know what's coming in 2 weeks, and then Levon's going to close us in prayer. But we, like I mentioned, one of my best friends and Jennifer's best friends, her name is Barbara Colwell. Some of you might know her. She is a Strength Finders assessment, like she has gotten her certification as a Strength Finders assessment. Y'all could say that. But anyway, she has said she would come here in 2 weeks and would talk about all the different strengths and how our strengths all come out in this group. So the host team has already sent ours into her, and she's kind of figured ours out. So here's the deal. You are going to get an email in the next day or two, right, Janet? And on the email, there'll be a link, and we're calling it 20 for 20 because it does have a cost. It's $19.99 to do it, and it takes 20 minutes. But if you do that, and then it has Barbara's email address, you can send the results to her, and then what she's going to do in 2 weeks is, or within these next 2 weeks, is she's going to compile kind of the results of our group and talk about the different strengths we have here. And I think it'll be really, really helpful. I know it's helped me a lot to recognize mine, to see what my husband's are, some of our kids, and that kind of thing. So I really encourage you, and she's got just a very quick video here, and she's going to share about it. So we'll end with that. Before Levon, you can come on up. Can we turn it up?
Each one of you are one of God's masterpieces. If you're like me at this stage of life, you're probably wondering, is how I'm wired or what I'm good at, does it really matter? Or how can I be stepping more into my jet stream and really doing more of the things that I love? Strength Finders is such a great tool that helps focus on your strengths, the things that you're good at, rather than your weaknesses. When I first learned about the top strengths of your host team, I was just amazed to think, yes, of course, that's why they create such an amazing atmosphere here for the things that y'all talk about and the things that you experience during these meetings. We'll take time to fill out your assessment and email them your top strengths back to me, and I can't wait to talk with you and learn more about who you are and how great that is.
I know you couldn't hear that real well, but just know that you'll be getting the information, and you can send it back. And even if you don't do it, or if you have friends in your life, you can pass it on to them too, who want to come and you haven't done it, still come, because she's going to talk about the strengths. So anyway, is there anything else that I'm leaving out? Anybody? Any questions from anybody?
Thanks to Julie for like our
Julie,
shuttle woman.
thank you for
Yeah.
shuttling.
Yeah.
Yes, Julie has done that numerous times. We so appreciate it. Leanne, I think you helped too, and whoever else did that. No, thanks for.
Barnes came early and helped
Yeah,
us.
that's right.
Kathy's always helpful. So, do you want to say something, Leanne?
I just want to say, if anybody's leaving and wants a ride, you park down here, I'll be happy to take you for either way.
Do you have time, Julie? Yeah. Okay, Julie and Leanne will help with shuttling. And thanks to Levon for having us today. So Levon's going to close us in prayer, and we'll hope to see you in 2 weeks.
Father, I just thank you so much for just bringing us here together, getting everyone here in this weather, and just thank you for the rain, and I just ask that you kind of come into our lives and help us point out to us the beauty that we can look for and the paths that we're going to take, and just help us just to keep all of that in mind through everything that we go through, the good, the bad, the crazy, the chaotic, and just know that you're there and that there is beauty, and you know what, just Lord, I ask that you too, that we not only see that in our hearts, but that we can share that and with everyone else around us, and they'll see beauty when they look at our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. If you want to put your cards back, we'll be able to play this game again in the future. So.